The beacon's call. The galaxy was vast, an endless expanse of stars and unknown worlds. And for someone like Jin Popchown, captain of the treasure finder, it was a place of both promise and peril. She was part of the Junker clan, a group of fearless salvagers who made their living by exploring the debris of long-forgotten wars, ancient ships, and lost colonies. Their world was one of scavenging and piecing together remnants from civilizations long past. But for all the danger they faced, Jin had always believed that the key to survival was simple: adapt, survive, and move forward. She had a plan, a dream that kept her going. If she could keep her clan alive long enough, she could take them to one of the terraformed worlds the humans had pioneered, a place where the air was breathable and the soil could grow crops. A fresh start, far from the glass gulf, where things felt like they were finally going their way. That was until the beacon appeared. It was an odd thing to come across. They had encountered strange beacons before, standard escape pods left behind by ships in distress, a routine part of the Junker's life. But this one had a prefix, the letters DB stamped on it. Jin's first instinct was to ignore it, to pass it off as yet another beacon left by a long-forgotten escape pod, long abandoned by the very people who had used it. But there was something about the signal that made her pause. DB? I've never seen a beacon with that prefix before, she muttered aloud, running the code through her ship's computer. Her digital crewmate, Edge, always lingering just a little too close for comfort, responded. Nope, never. Sounds old though. Human Republic, pre-contact. You sure you want to bother with this? Jin stared at the screen, feeling a flicker of unease. The Republic of Terror, the name itself had weight. A pre-contact human civilization. It had long been forgotten by the rest of the galaxy after the humans made first contact and joined the intergalactic Congression. The Republic's history was filled with violence, mystery, and betrayal, and it was largely erased. No one liked to talk about it. There couldn't be a survivor in there. Humans didn't live that long. The Republic had been torn apart decades ago, buried in the past, along with the darker parts of the human legacy. Humans don't live that long, Jin muttered to no one in particular. Edge, ever the mischievous digital assistant, chimed in from the console. Nope, they don't. Jin's eyes narrowed as she shot a glare at the interior camera. When did you come in the cockpit? She demanded. She hadn't heard the sound of him joining her. About half an hour ago, while I was cleaning up some artifacting in the forward sensor data, Edge replied, not at all sheepish. I didn't want to wake you. Your poor heart might have given out. Edge, we agreed. I get to handle the big decisions. We agreed, right? Jin snapped, her feathers bristling. You wake me up for the big stuff, not just some offbeat beacon. Sorry, Ginny, Edge said, his tone apologetic, but only just. I thought I wasn't supposed to wake you unless it was really important. But I thought we could take a look at the beacon. You know, since you've been making great progress on the salvage. Jin let out a long, drawn-out sigh and reluctantly nodded. Fine. If you're here, might as well send a general hail to the Republic ships. See if any of them are still around. Aye, Edge responded instantly. Hailing now. As Jin stared at the blinking light on her console, waiting for any response, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was about to walk into something bigger than her simple Junker's mission. She had seen the Republic's remnants before. Empty ships, abandoned colonies, and derelict stations scattered across the galaxy. But this beacon was different. That's weird. No answers. Edge said, sounding confused. Pod's trajectory's off too. It's not heading to any inhabited planets. It's going voidward, upward towered. Hold up, Jin interrupted. You're telling me this beacon isn't just some lost pod. This thing's going toward deep space. Yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I got a hit. Edge's voice shifted from confusion to intrigue. It's Republic. RTM. Vigbirth's answering. I'm patching through. Jin adjusted herself in the pilot's seat, making sure her feathers were neatly laid flat and her posture was proper for this unexpected communication. She didn't need the humans to see her flustered. She needed them to take her seriously. "Hello, this is certified junker journeyman Jin Popchown, captain of the treasure finder. Thank you for hailing back." The human face that blinked onto the screen was surprisingly young, with a bushy black beard that covered most of his face, but his eyes carried an undeniable warmth. Despite the rough exterior, there was an unmistakable softness to the way he looked at her, and she almost couldn't help but chirp. There was just something undeniably adorable about humans and their expressions. Yeah, good captain. You sent out that hail with a request for info on the Republic." His voice was thick with an accent, but it was friendly. "I'm always happy to answer questions." Jin nodded. "Are you reading an escape pod beacon? Should we provide emergency services?" The human paused for a moment, the warmth in his eyes fading into something more serious. "Nay, that ain't an escape pod. That's something different." Jin's heart skipped a beat. Something different. That sounded ominous. Her eyes narrowed. "There ain't anything of value at that beacon," the human continued. "I don't understand why the beacon's there, but it's definitely not what you think." Jin tilted her head, a bit confused. "But this is Republic territory, right? Why would they send out a signal like that?" The human didn't answer immediately. There was a slight pause before he spoke again. "Tell me, lass, do you have any debts?" Jin's mind raced. "Debts? We're roughly 6'4", tons of salvage away from completely emancipating our entire clan." Edge chirped helpfully, as if the answer to this question were as simple as a few numbers. The human paused again, his smile faltering, and the warmth in his eyes died as he processed the information. "In that case, lass, mayhaps you'll understand the term debeaconing." Jin frowned. Debt masters, and now debeaconing. What was he getting at? She didn't like the sound of that. "I'll send over the logs," the human added. "If you feel like it. No hurry. But you might want to take a look." The shadow of the Republic. The ship hummed steadily as Jin Popchown sat at the helm, her feathers lightly bristling with unease. The Republic beacon had been a curious find, but after speaking with the human from Big Berths, it felt more like a call to something far more sinister. The idea that the Republic of Terror, a name nearly as dangerous as it was mysterious, could still leave its mark on the galaxy decades after its fall, unsettled her. What kind of power, what legacy, did it have that even now, in the depths of space, its shadows still lingered? Jin turned her focus back to the console, where the log transmission from Big Berths was coming through. The data was still coming in, but the message was anything but clear. She glanced over at her crewmates, both Ashkevi and Ro, who were perched uneasily in their seats. Ashkevi's dark, beady eyes flickered as they followed the transmission line, while Ro's cybernetic fingers drummed softly against the hull, the soft whirring sound a constant reminder of his advanced modifications. Ashkevi broke the silence. "What's going on, Captain? This isn't like any normal beacon I've ever seen. The codes, the prefix DV, it's not standard." "And you saw how Big Berths reacted. He was holding something back." Jin nodded grimly. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. The Republic of Terror, a once powerful, ruthless human empire, had been wiped out long ago. Their history was written in blood, and its fall had been long buried under layers of conflict and forgotten alliances. But something about this beacon, this debeaconing, suggested that there were still remnants of their legacy, waiting for the right moment to resurface. "It doesn't add up," Jin said, her voice tight. "Why would a human ship, Big Berths, or anyone from the Republic, be involved in hiding a beacon like this?" "I don't know," Ashkevi admitted, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "But you're right to be suspicious. This wasn't a distress signal. It was a warning. But from who? And for what purpose?" Jin's sharp eyes shifted toward the small escape pod hanging in the cold emptiness of space just outside the treasure finder. They had been drifting toward it slowly after Big Berths had shared the initial data, and now they were less than a few hours away from docking. The pod's proximity was making her feel like they were walking into the unknown, not just in terms of distance, but in terms of the human legacy that had been left behind. "No one should be alive in that pod," Jin muttered. "The Republic of Terror wiped itself out a generation ago. The humans who survived after that, they started something new. They moved past it. So why now?" Ro, her engineer and confident, spoke up, his voice soft but insightful. "What if the pod is a trap? What if the beacon is trying to lure us into something we don't understand?" "Could be," Jin acknowledged, her eyes narrowing. "But I can't ignore it. No matter how dangerous this might be, I'm not about to let this opportunity slip through our fingers. If there's something worth salvaging, something worth understanding, we're going to find it." With her resolve set, Jin tapped a few commands into her console, linking up the beacon's logs with her systems. The feed from Big Berths continued, and as the data rolled in, one particular file stood out. It was an old encrypted message, too corrupted to read entirely but still undeniably human. The timestamp was from a long time ago, a period when the Republic of Terror still had fleets in orbit before the collapse. "I'll decrypt it," Ro said, glancing at the screen. "Give me a few minutes." Jin watched him work, her mind drifting back to the legacy of the Republic. She had heard the stories, of course. The human Republic had risen to power by conquest, dominating star systems with ruthless efficiency. They had built their empire on the bones of conquered worlds, pushing their borders across the galaxy. But something had gone wrong, terribly wrong. The collapse was swift, and no one knew exactly what had caused it. It was said that humans themselves had turned against their rulers, rejecting the brutal empire they had once built. Whether it was internal strife or a cataclysmic event, the Republic fractured. The remnants of its former glory were scattered. Abandoned space stations, derelict ships, and the scattered beacons of the past that still lingered like ghosts. "Done," Ro said, interrupting her thoughts. He handed Jin a small device. The decrypted file was ready. Jin took the device, her claws gripping it tightly. She turned to the rest of her crew. HFY was watching her carefully, but his usual calm demeanor seemed a little less steady now, like he too could feel the weight of what they were about to uncover. "All right," Jin said. "Let's see what we're dealing with." She inserted the device into the control panel, and the screen flickered as the file decrypted. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a series of characters appeared on the screen, followed by a voice message. The voice was clear, but cold, like it was coming from a distant past. "This is an official message from the Republic of Terror, to the one who finds this beacon. You are now part of something far greater than any of us could have imagined. What you hold is a key to a past long buried, a key to understanding what the Republic was meant to become. The one inside the pod is a reminder of our sins, a necessary burden. Whatever happens, remember, we are still here. We are still watching." Jin's breath caught in her throat. The message was chilling, not just in its tone, but in the implications it carried. The Republic's shadow had never truly gone away. Somehow, someway, the sins they had committed, the sins of their empire, were still watching, still lingering in the galaxy, ready to rise again. HFY spoke first. "What does this mean, Jin? The sins of the Republic. What does that even mean? Why would they leave this behind?" "I don't know," Jin replied, a chill running down her spine. "But we're going to find out. We can't turn back now. This beacon, this pod, this message, it's all part of something much bigger than we are." "Agreed," HFY said, his tone hardening. "Whatever it is, we're in it now, and whatever we find inside that pod." Jin nodded solemnly. "We'll face it together." Beneath the surface, the pod was mere hours away. It loomed in the distance like a dead relic from an age-long past, something abandoned, forgotten, and ignored. Yet, for some reason, it had been left untouched, waiting for them to find it. Jin Popchown couldn't shake the feeling that something had been waiting for her specifically. The Republic of Terror's legacy was buried in the cold void of space, but the beacon they had discovered was like an eerie whisper that seemed to be calling her. Her crew was silent as they prepared for what would come next. HFY, her first officer, had remained unusually quiet. The ever-stoic HFY was one to think deeply before acting, but now he seemed almost on edge. Even his usually steady heartbeat seemed slightly irregular. Perhaps the gravity of their findings was getting to him as well. Ro, the ship's engineer, was more focused on the technical side of things. His advanced cybernetic modifications allowed him to handle most of the ship's repairs and analysis, but even he had seemed distracted. His normally meticulous nature faltered as he examined the pod's location on the star charts. There was something unnerving about its exact trajectory. It wasn't just a random drift. It was as if the pod had been deliberately guided. Jin sat in the cockpit, her feathers slowly smoothing out, though her mind raced. Her claws gripped the armrests, the metal cool against her talons. She thought back to the message they had deciphered, the human voice, steady but filled with cold intent, claiming that the sins of the Republic were still watching, still lingering in the shadows. What did that even mean? And why had they been chosen to uncover this piece of history? Captain, HFY's voice broke through her thoughts, a trace of worry in it that wasn't usually there. The pod signal is getting stronger, but it's not responding to any of our communications. I've tried every frequency, every channel. It's almost like it's alive, waiting. Jin's feathers ruffled again. Waiting. She had thought the same thing. This wasn't just a beacon in space. It was a message, a puzzle meant to be solved. And like any puzzle, the deeper you dug, the more you realized there was something more hidden beneath. Ro leaned over, peering at the holographic display beside Jin. We've arrived. The pod's a few hundred meters away. It's just floating there in the void. No signs of decay, no signs of damage. It's intact. It shouldn't be, Jin said softly, her voice taut. It's been drifting for decades. It should have burned up, or at the very least, deteriorated. But it hasn't. It's like someone didn't want it to decay. A beacon that doesn't decay, HFY said under his breath, almost like it was intentionally preserved. But for what? Enough talk, Jin said, her voice firming as she locked eyes with her crew. We're opening it. Now. The ship's systems hummed as they prepared for the final approach. Jin keyed in the commands that would guide the treasure finder to the pod. The low thrusters kicked in, and the ship slowly maneuvered into position, docking with the escape pod. As the ship's docking clamps latched into place with a soft hiss, Jin's stomach tightened. There was a moment of stillness, almost as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Captain, we're locked in, Ro confirmed, his voice tense. Everything's aligned. Just give the word, and we can board. Edge, open the docking bay doors, Jin ordered. Aye, Captain. Doors opening now, Edge responded, his digital voice cutting through the air like a mechanical whisper. With a clank and a swoosh, the docking bay doors slid open, revealing the eerie sight of the pod. It looked small, almost fragile in comparison to the treasure finder, but the ominous aura surrounding it made Jin's skin crawl. The pod seemed almost too perfect, its hull unmarred by the ravages of time or space. It was human-made, that much was clear. But what was it carrying? Jin stepped into the docking bay first, her claws scraping softly against the metal floor. Her team followed, HFY bringing up the rear as always. They moved in unison, each step measured, each heartbeat accelerating as they got closer to the unknown. The soft hum of the treasure finder systems faded, replaced by the low vibrations of the pod. The hatch of the pod was right in front of them. It seemed to stare back at them. The message still echoed in Jin's mind. Let the one within have long hours to feel the weight of his sins and solitude to his ending day. A strange shiver ran down her spine. Solitude. Sins. This was more than just an abandoned pod. This was a prison, a vessel that had been meant to contain something, or someone, and leave them alone. But why? Jin took a deep breath and looked at her crew. Ashkevi, row, on my mark. Ashkevi nodded once, giving a small, grim smile. Ready, Captain. Row adjusted his modified arm, the cybernetic appendage flexing in anticipation. Let's do this. Opening the hatch, Jin declared, her voice low but resolute. Her claws hovered over the hatch's manual release mechanism, and with a sharp motion, she pressed it. A pneumatic hiss filled the bay as the pod equalized its internal pressure with the surrounding atmosphere. The door creaked open, and the darkness beyond the threshold seemed to reach out toward them, pulling them in. When the door fully opened, Jin's breath caught in her throat. The pod's interior was not what she had expected. There was no sign of a survivor, no sign of life. Instead, the interior was completely still, frozen in time, like some ancient tomb. But what lay inside was far worse than a simple corpse. At the center of the pod was a disfigured body, but not just any body. It was reptilian, like the ones Jin had seen in ancient texts about the Republic. Its body was twisted, mangled, its right arm amputated, grafted with something strange and unnatural. There were no eyes. The sockets were burned out, as if something had scorched them, and there was no tail, though it was clear that this being had once had one. The injuries were old, but not recent. They looked like they had been inflicted decades ago, and yet the body remained, preserved in this small vessel. The voice of Big Berth's echoed in her mind. This isn't an escape pod. It's something different. And whatever it is, you'll regret opening it. Jin couldn't look away from the body. It was human, but at the same time, it was something else, something twisted and lost. She stepped closer, feeling her heart race. What was this thing? What is this? Ro asked, his voice strained. Jin didn't answer immediately. She couldn't. She felt sick, her mind spinning. This wasn't just some escaped survivor. This wasn't some lost soul drifting in space. This was a message, a warning that had been left behind. But why? And by whom?